Good evening, colleagues in Brazil, and good morning, colleagues from Australia. My name is Matthew Johnston, and I'm the Counsellor for Education and Science at the Australian Embassy here in Brasilia. Before we start with the formalities, I would like to remind you all that simultaneous translation is available for you in your chosen language. If you look on the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little button that says interpretation. Please select that and choose either English or Portuguese as you like, and you will have translation for the duration of this workshop. I would like to thank you all very much for taking the time today to attend this webinar between Australia and Brazil, between the Australian Vocational Education and Training System, represented today by our public system, the TAFES, or the Technical and Further Education System in Australia. And we'll talk about our colleagues in a short moment, and our friends and colleagues from COALAR in Brazil, the largest agricultural training, vocational education and training service and system here in Brazil. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening for the first webinar to exchange practices in vocational education and training between Australia and Brazil. And indeed, we have a lot that we can share with each other and learn from each other. Both countries are large countries, continental-sized countries, with large focus on similar productive industries and activities such as agriculture. We have this and many other things in common. So we're really pleased to be able to facilitate this conversation and this discussion today between the two vocational education and training systems of Australia and Brazil. Today on the Australian side, we are joined by our colleagues from TAFE Queensland and our colleagues from TAFE Directors Australia. You'll hear from them very shortly. TAFE Directors Australia is the national body that coordinates Australia's large public vocational education and training system, which, very similar to COALAR and the other S-system training organizations in Brazil, is based around states and territories in Australia. So TAFE Directors Australia and our colleagues Eva and Craig, who will speak to you shortly, represent the national body, and TAFE Queensland, one of our state-based training bodies as well. I'm really pleased to be able to open this event, and I would like to acknowledge Andre Sanchez from COALAR, Maria Cristina, Ana Angela, and Demi Lucy, our friends from COALAR, for your collaboration and planning for these two webinars that we will undertake in the next 2 weeks. Vocational education and training, as I don't have to tell you all, is a really critical part of the education system for both countries. It provides great support to local communities and individuals in providing training, upskilling, and supporting the industry to grow jobs. It is particularly important as countries seek to emerge from the COVID-19 pandemic. Vocational education and training will be critical for upskilling people, for helping people find new jobs, to contribute to the economic recovery that all countries will face in coming months and years. Hopefully sooner rather than later, and hopefully sooner rather than later, this pandemic will leave us all. I would now like to introduce and welcome Mr. Andre Sanchez from COALAR to make his opening remarks. And I would like to thank you all again for your time. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the great exchanges and great discussions we will have over these next couple of days. Thank you very much. Over to you, Andre.
Muito obrigado, Matthew Johnson. Muito obrigado a todos os representantes da TAFE Director. Eu gostaria de parabenizar a iniciativa da TAFE Director e da Embaixada da Austrália aqui no Brasil por essa oportunidade, para que a gente possa fazer uma troca de experiências e compartilhar informações que certamente serão bem úteis para as duas instituições de treinamento e capacitação. Nós acreditamos aqui que o Brasil é um país continental, com diferentes aptidões regionais até na produção agropecuária, né? A realidade de uma região do Brasil não é a mesma de uma região diferente, mais ao sul, então é um desafio para o Senar capacitar e formar pessoas no meio rural de acordo com as particularidades das suas regiões. Então, eu acho essa iniciativa muito louvável, bastante produtiva, e eu agradeço imensamente, em nome aqui, estou representando o diretor-geral do Senar, Dr. Daniel Carrera, em nome dele eu agradeço pelo convite e por essa oportunidade. Muito obrigado, Matheus.
Thank you very much, Andre. Before I pass over to Eva, who will be our moderator today for the webinar, I would like to just do that piece of guidance and suggestions around the webinar relating to please keep yourself on mute. We have deliberately left this forum open so that we can all see each other and interact with each other. We have specific moments for questions and answers, which will be facilitated just because of time restraints through the chat function on the bottom of your screen. So if you have a particular question for any of our speakers, please utilize the chat function, and at a key moment, we will ask those questions on your behalf. Christina Elsner from my team and I will be monitoring those questions and we'll ask them at the appropriate moment. So I thank you all very much for your participation again, and just remind you that please feel free to have your videos open. It's really nice to be able to see each other and interact, but if you can please leave your microphone on mute, that would be very appreciated, very much appreciated. All right, over to you. Thanks very much, Eva.
Thank you very much, and welcome again, everyone. My name is Eva Filipiak. I'm the International Director at TAFE Directors Australia, and very happy to be with you today. Just to add for some people who have joined us, that we have an interpretation function. So for those who haven't heard the first announcement, you can find and you can click on the Portuguese channel at the bottom of your screen for interpretation throughout the webinar. Also please note that this webinar is being recorded and we'll be sending you the recording at the end of the session. So it is my pleasure to be the facilitator of today's session on the role of technical and vocational education and training in supporting the transformation of the agricultural sector and sharing of experiences and best practices between Australia and Brazil. I would like to open the first session which explores the challenges and opportunities brought by the COVID-19 pandemic for vocational education providers such as Senar and TAFEs in Australia. So I would like to call our first speaker. So Andre Sanchez, if you could step in again. Andre is the Director of Innovation and Knowledge at Senar, and he'll be talking to us about the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on at your organization, providing an overview on the main changes in your training activities, and will be followed by Craig Robertson, CEO of TDA, for a similar analysis of the situation in Australia. Andre, over to you. Thank you.
Ok, Eva, muito obrigado. Mais uma vez, boa noite de novo a todos. Bom dia a vocês que estão aí na Austrália. É uma honra poder falar um pouco, embora num tempo muito curto, mas eu vou tentar sintetizar o que é o Senar e de que forma nós fomos impactados aí por esse momento difícil de pandemia que estamos vivendo já há pouco mais de um ano, né? O Senar, à semelhança do TAFE Directors, é uma entidade focada, criada por lei para atuar na capacitação e formação profissional, tanto do produtor rural brasileiro, mas também do trabalhador rural brasileiro. Estamos completando 30 anos de atuação, fomos fundados em 1991. Né? Mas nossa principal ação no Senar pode ser subdividida em 3 principais focos de ação. São eles a formação profissional rural, a promoção social, que são atividades mais voltadas para a família do produtor e do trabalhador rural, e, mais recentemente, focamos as nossas ações também na assistência técnica e gerencial, Desenvolvemos uma própria metodologia, nossa própria metodologia de orientar presencialmente em campo ao produtor rural com foco na garantia da sua rentabilidade. Não simplesmente ensinando ele a produzir, mas sim ensinando ele a se manter na atividade, tornando aquela atividade economicamente viável para que garanta a sustentabilidade do produtor e da sua família. Esse é o foco da assistência técnica gerencial. O Brasil é um país continental, como a Austrália, muito grande, de grandes extensões. Nós somos divididos em 27 unidades da federação. São os nossos estados, são 26 estados e mais o Distrito Federal, compondo aí 27 estados da federação. O Senar Central, a quem eu estou representando aqui hoje, todo o sistema, fica em Brasília, mas as ações em campo são totalmente tocadas por muitos dos que estão aqui nos acompanhando, que são representantes daquilo que a gente chama de administrações regionais do Senar. Cada um dos 27 estados tem uma administração regional do Senar, que é quem executa de maneira prática e mais próxima às atividades do Senar. Então, ao Senar Central compete esse pensamento estratégico, a criação metodológica, mas quem executa as atividades, tanto junto aos produtores rurais quanto aos trabalhadores rurais, são as administrações regionais do Senar, e aqui eu vejo muitos representantes dessas administrações regionais. Alguns números de 2020, só para se dar uma ideia, em 2020 já foi um ano já impactado pela pandemia, ou seja, números abaixo do que o Senar costuma apresentar, mas ainda assim significativos. Na formação profissional rural, tivemos 321 mil participantes. Nas atividades de promoção social, 97 mil participantes. Nos programas especiais, que são de carga horária mais reduzida, e programas específicos voltados para a área de gestão, tivemos 116.600 participantes. Sobre assistência técnica, que é uma atividade mais recente, mas que já está trazendo bastante resultados, só em 2020, até 2020 foram mais de 800 mil visitas à propriedade. Nesta metodologia de assistência técnica, o técnico que é treinado, formado, capacitado por nós, ele tem um grupo de propriedades dentro de uma cadeia produtiva específica, em que ele dá um atendimento presencial personalizado para um grupo de produtores. Então, um técnico atende de 25 a 30 produtores, tendo a obrigação de fazer uma visita presencial à propriedade de, no mínimo, 4 horas, uma vez por mês. Então, esses números aí se subdividem. Temos hoje um exército de 200 mil propriedades cadastradas e presentes nesse programa já, e uma gama muito grande de instrutores e técnicos que atendem esses produtores e que são formados e têm a sua formação atualizada pela nossa equipe metodológica. A assistência técnica, como eu mencionei, ela é focada em cadeia produtivas específicas. Então, se um mesmo técnico ele atende 25 a 30 propriedades de fruticultura, por exemplo. Outro técnico atende 25 a 30 propriedades de pecuária de leite ou de pecuária de corte. Então, ele vai dar um atendimento específico sobre aquela cadeia produtiva especificamente. Outra área de atuação nossa é na formação, na capacitação do ensino técnico. Aqui no Brasil a gente chama de nível médio, né? Em que a gente tem 2 cursos grandes focados na gestão do agronegócio e gestão em fruticultura. A Maria Cristina e a Ana Ângela falarão mais à frente sobre o curso de fruticultura. Esses cursos são disponibilizados por meio de 160 polos de educação à distância, que estão divididos nas 5 grandes regiões brasileiras, né? Alguns números da formação técnica em 2020, disponibilizamos 31 mil vagas, 21.140 matrículas efetivas desde 2015, e já formamos 6.430 profissionais de nível técnico. Esses profissionais têm uma partição de 56% são do sexo masculino, 46% feminino, e uma divisão de faixa etária, 36% entre 17 a 25 anos, 40% entre 26 e 35 anos e 24% acima de 36 anos de idade. Então, é um público diferenciado, né? Falando especificamente sobre a questão da pandemia e ressaltando, né, o que isso trouxe dificuldade para a nossa atuação, eu gostaria de destacar que a pandemia trouxe, sim, uma dificuldade para a continuidade dos nossos serviços, mas, de certa forma, o Senar já vinha investindo bastante no ensino à distância dentro daquilo que era possível. Então, precisamos, sim, fazer alguns ajustes, mas nada que já não estivesse no nosso radar como plataforma, como objetivo de transmissão de conhecimento e de formação profissional, uma vez que esse é um caminho para um país de dimensões continentais, esse é um caminho que a pandemia só veio acelerar esse processo na nossa visão, né? Temos, claro, algumas dificuldades. Não podemos contar com uma cobertura de internet plena no Brasil. Nós temos ainda regiões no país em que não temos acesso à internet, nem sequer a 3G, muito menos 4G ou 5G. Então, esse é um desafio que estamos já em vias de enfrentar, essa dificuldade de acesso, de ampliação do ensino remoto, que limita, de certa forma, a nossa atuação. Ainda sobre a pandemia e falando agora um pouco sobre assistência técnica. As visitas, como eu mencionei, em propriedade, eram feitas presencialmente. Então, havia uma relação, um contato muito próximo do técnico com aquele produtor. Quando a pandemia surgiu e veio de uma maneira já agressiva no Brasil, em março e abril de 2020, nós tivemos que rapidamente adaptar uma metodologia de atendimento a esse produtor, de forma que ele não ficasse desassistido. Então, desenvolvemos todo um processo de continuidade do atendimento a esse produtor de uma maneira remota, pelo canal que melhor conviesse àquele produtor. Então, foi questionado a ele se ele gostaria de ser atendido por telefone, por ligação de chamada em vídeo, via SMS, via e-mail, da maneira que fosse mais acessível a ele. Cabe lembrar, sobre a pandemia, que as decisões de abertura ou fechamento, de maior rigor ou menor rigor do lockdown, coube aos estados, e alguns estados impuseram condições mais críticas que dificultaram as atividades presenciais do que outros. Então, isso foi sendo ajustado de acordo com a realidade naquele momento daquele estado. Mas nós percebemos também que, mesmo onde não houvesse tanta restrição, o próprio produtor beneficiário que receberia aquele técnico estava se sentindo inseguro de receber uma pessoa que atende várias outras. Então, isso tudo foi ponderado de modo a que a gente fizesse uma calibragem de como aquele produtor queria ser assistido nesse momento de pandemia. E isso foi implementado já logo no início da pandemia, no ano passado, e é o que vem vigorando até hoje, né? Isso reduziu um pouco a entrada de novos participantes nos programas de formação do Senar, mas nós não deixamos, em momento nenhum, de atender aqueles que já vinham em atendimento, né? Graças ao esforço tanto da equipe interna do Senar Central, mas essencialmente também das equipes das regionais do Senar que vão a campo. Obviamente, permeando tudo isso um cuidado muito grande que tivemos que ter com os nossos próprios colaboradores, né, para evitar o risco de contágio, de contaminação deles próprios. Então, o Senar criou um protocolo interno de acompanhamento, de testagem, de segurança para todos os seus colaboradores, que foi repassado para as suas regionais também, para tentar minimizar, dentro do possível, o risco de contágio, né? Internamente, no Senar Central, ainda vivemos uma situação um pouco diferente, no sentido do número de pessoas. Criamos o trabalho remoto, o trabalho semipresencial. Hoje, fisicamente, estão na instituição apenas um grupo reduzido de trabalho, e isso vale não só para o Senar, mas para outra entidade, para a CNA, que é a Confederação Nacional da Agricultura e Pecuária do Brasil, entidade de representação dos produtores ao qual o Senar é vinculado, para o Instituto CNA, para a faculdade, ou seja, todas as instituições que compõem o sistema estão sobre o mesmo e rígido protocolo de segurança ainda. Mas do ponto de vista do avanço das nossas ações de formação profissional, nós tivemos, sim, alguma queda, mas nada muito expressivo em termos de resultado, porque já vínhamos muito bem preparados para essa transição e esse aumento das atividades remotas de trabalho, né? É um desafio para o Senar dar continuidade a esse trabalho. O Brasil é um país essencialmente agrícola, embora tenha uma indústria, um comércio também fortes, mas a atividade principal do país é a agropecuária, e nós somos a entidade de formação profissional desse segmento da economia brasileira. Então, temos ciência da nossa responsabilidade, ciência da contribuição que devemos dar, e acreditamos que devemos buscar a inovação tecnológica para o nosso produtor rural de uma maneira adequada àquilo que, de fato, vai trazer um resultado a ele. Como eu disse no início, nós temos produtores, a produção rural brasileira, do ponto de vista do perfil da produção, ela é bastante heterogênea. Nós temos produtores altamente tecnificados, que usam equipamentos de primeira linha, com muita inovação tecnológica, mas também temos, numa outra ponta, um produtor que não tem acesso a tecnologia nenhuma, né, que ainda produz hoje da mesma forma de produzir que se usava há 30, 40, 50 anos atrás. Então, esse é um desafio que o Senar tem, de adequar a inovação tecnológica à realidade daquele produtor, com foco sempre no desenvolvimento dele, da sua propriedade, da sua atividade, e trazendo para ele a rentabilidade, de modo que ele continue dentro da sua atividade, não abandone a atividade, né? Então, fizemos muitas ações estratégicas durante esse período para manter as ações do Senar, né? Divulgamos uma coleção sobre a Covid-19, o coronavírus, com uma série de informações de prevenção, tanto para os produtores quanto para os nossos públicos internos, de modo a darmos a continuidade das nossas ações. Então, em linhas bem gerais, é o que eu tinha a dizer, mas podemos aqui ficar à disposição para algum esclarecimento mais específico que for necessário. Eu acho que eu mantive meu tempo de 7 minutos e meio com o Dr. Craig Roberts para que ele possa falar. Muito obrigado pela oportunidade mais uma vez.
Okay, so I'm going to speak. Thank you. Let me just turn down my turn off my translation so there is not double Dutch, or in this case, double Portuguese. So welcome everybody and greetings from Australia. It's early morning here. It's been a big day in Australia because our federal government has announced last night its budget, and it's signalled what it's trying to do to help Australia recover from the COVID experience. So there's been quite a lot of investment into aged care, digital transformation, and for skills training. So it's been quite a big few hours. Thank you, Matthew, and for our friends at the Australian Embassy in Brazil. It's fantastic that we've had this relationship established where we can connect with such important people like yourself through the embassy. So thank you once again for that. And Eva's going to just check with me that I've got 15 minutes so I don't go over. You're going to nod your head, aren't you, that it's 15 minutes? Okay.
I may let you know when you have 2 more minutes.
Thank you. That might well be a bit of a reaction that sometimes I can talk too long. Let me share my screen with you. There we go. What we're wanting to do today in this remaining 14 minutes is to give you an overview of what happened in Australia when we reacted through a variety of public health measures to COVID-19. And luckily for us, we were able to, if I can then just get my slide to move on, which I'm now having trouble with. Oh, there we go. Towards the end of last year, we were able to prepare a publication called The Power of TAFE, the COVID Story, based upon surveys that we went out to our members. Our members have roughly about 300,000 to 400,000 students across Australia in just over 500 campuses. And mainly the vet experience in Australia is you mainly come into campus for your vocational education. And so when the disruption came by COVID-19, there was quite a bit of change that was required. Let's have a look now at what were the rough timelines during last year. During the peak of the first wave of COVID-19 through the economy, and due to public health measures, most people were asked to stay at home, work from home, and also study from home. So you could see that initially in March and April, Australia closed its borders. From that time, really within a very short space of time, TAFEs moved to online delivery. And from mid-May, there was easing of restrictions, but that was different per each state and territory in Australia. But in essence, many TAFEs continued with distance learning or virtual connected learning. And so that really has continued for quite a substantial part of 2020. Then we had a second outbreak in Victoria, which is our southern state. And that was an extended period of lockdown to get on top of a particular nasty spread domestically of COVID. And then since about November, most of our activity, whether it's going to work, whether it's studying, or whether it's about going out for dinner and going to the movies, etc., have generally started to return to normal. And apart from a few outbreaks every now and again, Australia has been remarkably lucky. We must confess, though, that that has come on the back of that we are obviously an island continent with basically controls for people coming in and out of the country. So we've been able to limit the spread of the virus just purely by limiting the amount of people who are able to return to Australia. I'm going to skip over that slide. Let's now look at what were really three streams of vocational education response once we knew that we had a public health crisis coming our way through COVID. The first one is that we made sure that courses that enabled people to work safely were up and running as quickly as possible. And some of those were, of course, infection control, safe food handling, but also Australia then immediately put in what we call telehealth measures. That is, you could have a consultation with your doctor over the phone. And so that needed a whole new range of administrative support. And of course, because both businesses and trainers were moving to connected learning, there was a big uplift in inquiries and training around digital literacy and communication. Then we made sure that where there was going to be surge in particular areas in the economy due to the impact of the virus, that there was an uplift in training in those areas. And of course, they came to areas like community services, where there were families that were facing disruption, clearly nursing. We also had a large surge in mental health and wellbeing presentations. And we also, during that period, made sure that our childcare centres were able to remain open in the main. And so there was a surge for childcare workers. And of course, because we're such a large country, similar to Brazil, of course, and we need to be able to make sure that we got key equipment to address the spread of the virus. That was very important as well, so we could make sure goods continued to flow across the country. And then we then sat back a bit and said, well, let's make sure that we have some focus on what are those going to be long-term skills that are going to help sort of the recovery. Clearly business services, cybersecurity, which is an ongoing priority in Australia. Building and construction, because believe it or not, the economy and building and construction was very strong. I'm not sure what's happened in Brazil, but in Australia, because we're not able to go overseas and enjoy our holidays, everybody's got a lot more disposable income. And so our building and construction industry has gone, is incredibly busy. And agriculture, of course, has also been busy because against all of that, we've had very good weather and rain after long periods of drought. So our agricultural sector has taken off as well. What we did do, though, is looked at in the vet courses in TAFEs, we asked our TAFEs to respond about their reaction to changing to digital or connected learning. Now, we should just be a little bit careful about what we're meaning by digital, connected, or online. Essentially, what was going on is there were people using platforms such as Zoom. Some learning materials were sent out by post. Where there was online material, they could use online facilities and the like. So there was a whole range of measures that were put into place. So when we say online, we're really meaning a range of measures that allowed students to remain connected with their TAFE and their teacher. We had 4 categories of courses that we each had a general approach. There were those courses that were digital already. In other words, they were delivered online. And so they were quite easy to move online for all students. There were those that were digitally suited. Maybe they hadn't gone to online just because of other priorities, but it wasn't too hard to move that content and deliver that content to digital delivery. The third one was digitally challenging, and that's probably because of the nature of the course or the nature of the trainer. These particular courses had quite a few elements of practical hands-on learning and acquiring of skills. And as such, the teachers were not that familiar with delivering in a connected way. So essentially what happened in those ones is that some of the theory moved online. So in other words, they front-ended the theory delivery in the hope that then students would come back once the close downs had been lifted. And the last category was what we call digitally limited. And this is where there is very strong focus on acquiring skills and craft. And in Australia, we typically see that as our trades, which are really building and construction trades, which are obviously carpentry, tiling, electrotechnology, plumbing. And we also have in the trades in Australia, hairdressing. And those ones are ones where you really come to the classroom to practice your skills, and there was limited movement on those. So let's quickly have a look at what happened with our move. This is a sense of the average amount of each course type to move to digital delivery. Clearly, of course, you could see that those courses that were digitally enabled already were able to do it in just on 20 days. The digitally suited and digitally challenged still took a longer period of time. But you can see there, even for the digitally challenged, sorry, I've mentioned the time here. The graph on the left, sorry, I've misrepresented that. This is the spread of the courses that fit into those three categories. And then on the right is the amount of each course type that moved to digital delivery. And as you would expect, the digital already close to 75% of that moved online. Digitally suited, just over 60%. And interestingly, the digitally challenging was just over 70% were able to move to some form of online learning. And remember, I mentioned there that they brought forward some of the theory components. And as to be expected, type 4, very limited amounts of that was transferred or delivered online. Now let's think about the proportions that moved. And as you can see there on the left-hand side, close to 100% of the digitally already were able to be moved to online, and it's declining down to the digitally limited. And of course, on the right-hand side, there was the amount of days that it took to transition each of those to some form of digital delivery. Now, what was most remarkable out of this is that when COVID struck in Australia, we were coming up close to the end of the first half of, we were coming up to a semester break for our TAFEs. And most governments said we'll have an extended break of 3 weeks. And during those 3 weeks, and you can see that in the sort of the days that have that it took to do the transition, teachers worked incredibly hard to put all of these things in place so that they're ready to have connected learning when the students technically returned to their study, but they returned to study from home.
Craig,
These were the factors.
5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. These were the factors that were impacting on the move to digital, and they were things that you would expect out of any move. It was the readiness of the student cohort. Whilst we'd be pleased to say in Australia that we have good digital technology spread across the economy, there are still many who are not connected or do not have a laptop. The teacher readiness, of course, the amount of knowledge-based or theoretical learning helped. Obviously, was a help for transitioning, and also the amount of workshop or simulated or practical skills assessments that impacted on the ability to actually move. What was the teacher experience? We have almost a universal response that says teachers who thought they were not going to be capable of doing delivery in an online context or in a connected way were able to adjust their teaching in particular ways. And in fact, the most feedback is that teachers were very pleased that under these extreme circumstances, they really were pleased with how well they did in converting to digital delivery. This issue here were some of the issues for our students, and it's what you would expect. Some didn't have access to the learning, to the appropriate devices like laptops or to have a good bandwidth connection. Of course, many of our students are parents, and so they were trying to study while they also had children home from school. So there was lots of competing pressure on them. And of course, the general thing is how to access learning and support materials and use that in an appropriate way where you really haven't got a teacher in the classroom to help you out. Our general feedback from students is they enjoyed the experience, but their preference is to come back into a classroom. I'm going to skip that one. Here's a sense of some of the areas in which training occurred. We quickly put up a number of micro credentials, but there is also full qualifications that people could do in online or through some form of connected learning. But primarily there was a strong focus on sort of short courses. And on the right, there are the full range of areas in which the training occurred. Community services was strong. Then there was communication technology, of course, nursing, building and construction, infection control. These are some of the lessons that we've learned from our TAFEs about how to move forward. We need to look at our resources. We need to improve our flexibility in terms of scheduling. And if we move online, there's a different form of student engagement. So they've all been valuable lessons for us. If we think about lessons learned, and what I'm going to do here is look at the student experience. There was, as a result of COVID, greater and more diverse student engagement. The students appreciated the opportunity, despite not being able to come onto campus, that they could still stay connected with their teacher. And believe it or not, that really helped with mental health and well-being. We found, though, that there needs to be different forms of online support and engagement. We now see that our students expect options to be able to access flexible delivery. We've sort of shown what can be done. Even though they want to return to campus, there is a sense, though, that when they need it, they would like to be able to access quite a part of their content and even some of their course online. We offered a whole range of free courses, and that brought a whole pile of new people from the community into training. And we're wanting to try to make sure they continue on their journey. And the last point is that even though we have had success, we're still aware of the digital divide in our community. There are those that can readily and easily connect online. There are still a large number of people in our community who don't have that facility, and we need to be able to make sure that we can do that. All in all, it was a very successful process for us, but it was also stressful, particularly as everybody was trying to do the best they could for their students, but also respecting the public health measures that could be put in place. We hope it's a transition point for our TAFEs in terms of moving more strongly into online learning. And that therefore means, similar to what we are doing here, just imagine 10 years' time, maybe only 5 years' time, when we are sharing resources and content and teaching across the world. And that's not too far of an impossibility if we think through what's happened over this last 12 months. So thank you, Eva.
Thank you very much, Craig. You have been lucky to have had a little bit extra time and finish on time, which is great. So a question maybe for me to Andre. Craig finished on the perspectives for the Australian TVET providers about the changes going forward. Andre, what's your observation and what is your view on how the pandemic, even when hopefully not too long a future, will come out of it? What are the trends, and what are the big kind of long-term changes that will have happened in the training sector in agriculture in Brazil from your perspective?
Obrigado, Eva, pela pergunta. Acho que o ponto principal é e é positivo que isso tenha acontecido. A pandemia trouxe um ensinamento de consolidação do ensino à distância. Aqui no Brasil, havia ainda em diversos setores, e por uma questão cultural até, uma certa resistência ao ensino à distância, ao ensino digital. De repente, todo mundo se viu obrigado, por um problema grave que estamos vivendo, mas todo mundo se viu obrigado a ceder, e paradigmas foram quebrados em relação à aceitação desta forma de transmissão de conhecimento. Então, ainda eu acho que isso vai ser o principal legado, em que venceu-se um preconceito, uma resistência a essa modalidade de transmissão de conteúdo por via digital. Eu acho que as pessoas estarão muito mais receptivas a essa funcionalidade e o alcance é tremendo, né? Como eu disse na minha fala inicial, o maior desafio hoje é o problema da falta de conectividade nas regiões rurais do Brasil. Diferente do TAF, pelo que eu percebi, vocês atuam em diferentes setores da economia. Um papel com todo o sistema S aqui do Brasil seria o equivalente, mas nós temos o S do agro, que é o nosso caso, o Senar, tem o sistema da indústria, tem o do comércio, que cada um tem a sua atuação no seu setor da economia específico. No nosso caso, do Senar, como a nossa atuação é rural, e normalmente ambientes rurais têm menor cobertura de internet, então esse talvez seja o nosso principal desafio. Mas temos alguns desafios comuns com o que foi apresentado pelo Craig, que é essa necessidade de adaptação. Nem todo mundo está familiarizado com a tecnologia. Então, nos nossos cursos, naquilo que o Senar oferece na modalidade digital, de ensino à distância, tem todo um segmento de acolhimento, de acompanhamento daquele aluno para tornar o conteúdo e o uso da plataforma mais acessível para ele. Então, vencida a barreira da resistência ao ensino à distância e capacitando com uma linguagem bastante acessível para que esse produtor saiba utilizar a ferramenta e absorver os conhecimentos, eu acho que nós conseguiremos dar um salto muito grande na formação profissional aqui no Brasil, no ambiente rural.
Thanks very much. Matthew, you wanted to jump in briefly in regards to translation, I think.
Eu não tenho muito a complementar, não. Mas a derivação da pergunta do Elohim, que eu acho interessante.
Bom, só um comentário bem rápido, se alguém tiver alguma questão na tradução, tem ao final da barra, na parte de baixo, tem um ícone que parece um mapa do globo. Cliquem nele e escolham português. A gente recebeu alguns comentários de pessoas que não souberam bem navegar o botão da tradução. Se alguém não souber, pode escrever no chat que em privado a gente orienta como acessar.
All right. Okay. Thanks very much, Christina. So we note that for clarity of sound, it would be good for everyone who is not speaking to have their microphone off. So yes, thanks for that reminder. Also, just everyone a reminder about the interpretation function, because we've had quite a few people coming in and out. So for the new people who haven't heard that there is this function available, just be aware that the webinar is being interpreted, and you can access the Portuguese translation by clicking on the Portuguese function. So any questions to Andre and Craig about their presentation? Otherwise, we might keep some questions possibly for our TAFE Queensland speakers who will be presenting some experiences in one of the Australian TAFEs, and that might prompt some of your questions. Just checking. So let's move on to the second session. And again, I think that might the presentations that Shauna and Rosalie will make may prompt some questions or comments from you. So the second session will deal with the topic of addressing the challenges of digital learning. So something that we've already picked as one of the key areas, both in Australia and Brazil, that have come out of the experience of adapting to the COVID-19 crisis. So, and before Take Queensland apologies, I do want to note that we will have also COALAR talking about their experience more specifically to moving online. And I would like to invite two speakers and colleagues to talk to us about this. So I would like to invite Ana Angela de Medeiros Sousa, who's the coordinator of distance education, the education nucleus, and Maria Cristina Ferreira, who's the coordinator of formation education, to come and present their experience at COALAR. Thanks very much.
Boa noite, me ouvem? Sim, a apresentação já está compartilhada com vocês? Eu não tive retorno, acho que está tudo bem?
Está sim, Ana.
Então
All
tá
good,
bom.
it's all clear, thank you.
Ok, thank you. Eu agradeço, né, esse convite que nos foi feito, a TAFE, Embaixada da Austrália. Como o doutor André também colocou há pouco, nós falaremos um pouco da nossa experiência do COALAR na formação inicial continuada, técnica e tecnológica do ensino online. Então, a minha fala, tenho 5 minutos, tentarei ser bem, trazer todas as informações nesse tempo, e logo após a Maria Cristina fala um pouco sobre técnicos, cursos técnico e tecnológico, né? O nosso portal EAD, voltado para cursos de formação inicial e continuada, nós, ano passado, em 2020, completamos 10 anos. Então, é uma experiência, é uma iniciativa, né, do COALAR que tem esse intuito de contribuir com a formação, com a profissionalização das pessoas no meio rural, olhando também, ajudando a aumentar a rentabilidade dos seus negócios, garantir a sustentabilidade do meio ambiente. Então, desenvolver cursos, criar cursos que tragam essa experiência voltada para o meio rural. Então, pensando realmente no nosso público, estudos de caso, experiências, atividades que tragam a realidade para ele, né? Então, o nosso portal EAD, hoje, ele tem 82 cursos de carga horária variadas, que vão desde 10 horas, 30 horas, 40 horas, né, divididos em programas. Você consegue identificar onde você... a busca, né, do curso que você está procurando. Então, dividido em cadeias produtivas, em temas transversais como gestão. Então, 82 cursos hoje com 21 programas. E nesses 10 anos, nós já atendemos mais de 1 milhão de alunos. Então, nessa linha do tempo de 10 anos do portal EAD COALAR, diante da pandemia, nós percebemos que estávamos bem à frente, né, preparados para atender ao nosso público naquele momento. Inclusive, tivemos um desafio de fazer um curso inédito em 2 semanas. Então, o desenvolvimento do curso nesse período, com as pessoas dentro de casa, a equipe toda dentro de casa, como é que a gente vai gravar, fazer os vídeos e colocar o curso no ar nesse período, mas a gente tinha que fazer. Então, pela nossa experiência sendo adquirida durante esses 10 anos, foi possível atender o público, inclusive também com esse curso, ajudando a ver uma oportunidade também de renda nesse período de pandemia. E os nossos cursos, eles têm uma profundidade do conhecimento. Vale salientar também que os cursos de formação inicial e continuada, os cursos livres, nós temos mais liberdade também, que nós estamos presos tanto à legislação quanto os cursos formais, como a Maria Cristina vai falar logo agora, né? Então, nós desenvolvemos com recursos interativos, com recursos educacionais, como eu falei, trazendo essa experiência para o aluno realmente da realidade dele do campo, né? Nossos cursos também, eles têm tanto cursos com tutoria, quanto cursos autoinstrucionais. Mas os cursos autoinstrucionais têm a presença de monitores também que auxiliam o aluno com qualquer dúvida técnica que possa vir a ter. Eu trouxe alguns números aqui, mostrando como a gente trabalha para o nosso público, né? Então, a relação dos alunos com o meio rural. Então, nós temos 48% trabalhadores que trabalham ou estudam no setor, 18% filhos de trabalhador rural, 17% trabalhador e produtor rural. E isso não quer dizer que os 4% não significam que também não são pessoas que estão envolvidas de uma certa forma com o setor. Então, nossa preocupação sempre é direcionar esses cursos para esse setor. No perfil dos nossos alunos, é representado por 53% de homens, 47% de mulheres e 73% é a idade entre 18 e 35 anos. Né? O nosso ambiente virtual de aprendizagem é um ambiente acessível, responsível. Nós temos alguns recursos, como eu mencionei, mas a gente tem fórum, chat, biblioteca, conteúdos complementares. Dentro dos nossos recursos, vídeos, videoaulas, podcasts, para ser um curso bem diversificado mesmo e ajudar o aluno nessa conclusão, né? Todos os nossos cursos têm a certificação de participação e, ao final, um preenchimento de uma pesquisa de satisfação que nos dá o retorno da melhoria contínua no nosso ambiente, no desenvolvimento dos nossos cursos, né? Na plataforma como um todo também. E na nossa pesquisa de satisfação, a gente tem um índice aí de 98% de satisfação. Pensando também no nosso público, como o doutor André colocou, o Craig também falou de diversificar, né, de ser diverso, de ter outras ferramentas, como é que a gente atende esse público com algumas dificuldades também na conectividade. Então, nós temos hoje no nosso portal a coleção Senar, cartilhas e vídeos. As cartilhas são recursos instrucionais que nós já temos há bastante tempo, são usados nos cursos presenciais como recursos auxiliares, mas hoje estão disponíveis a todo o público. Apenas faz um cadastro no nosso portal e você tem acesso a todo esse material. Elas são feitas de uma forma muito simples, com passo a passo, uma metodologia própria também, que auxilia o produtor, né, nesses temas. Então, hoje são mais de 175 cartilhas na nossa coleção Senar Cartilhas e mais de 100 vídeos, pensando também num outro formato no nosso público, né? Aqui está o nosso link também de acesso ao nosso portal. E esse ano, agora, nós lançamos, na verdade, semana passada, um aplicativo, onde tem também a coleção Senar de cartilhas. Pensando, quando ele estiver com a internet, ele baixa a cartilha que ele quer acessar, e quando ele estiver offline, no trabalho, sem a internet, ele pode acessar esse material. Nós montamos com busca por texto, busca por voz, você pode selecionar a cartilha, favoritar, compartilhar com outras pessoas. Então, desenvolvemos muitos recursos para atender. Então, acho que esse panorama mostra um pouquinho todas as ferramentas que nós conseguimos oferecer para o nosso público e que ficou mais evidente realmente nesse momento de pandemia. É claro que a gente está em evolução, muito tem que se fazer, várias tecnologias têm surgido também. A nossa equipe, boa parte da nossa equipe está presente hoje nessa webinar, ninguém faz isso sozinha, então é uma equipe muito engajada em pensar em como pode ser essa experiência do usuário com todos esses recursos que nós temos ofertado nesse momento e no que a gente tem ainda desenvolvendo, que logo também disponibilizaremos novas ferramentas para o nosso público. Eu não sei se eu corri demais, às vezes a gente fica, né, nesse tempo, mas é isso, nós teremos um tempo para perguntas, estou à disposição. Então, agora eu vou passar a palavra para a Maria Cristina, que vai falar um pouco da formação técnica.
Obrigada, Ana Ângela. Vocês estão me ouvindo bem?
Sim.
Obrigada. Então, dando continuidade a essa nossa fala, agora eu vou comentar um pouco sobre o trabalho no Senar, na organização e oferta da formação técnica à distância, né? O Senar, nesse tempo de execução, como o nosso diretor André comentou no início, esse ano completamos 30 anos de trabalho. Durante muito tempo, o Senar se organizou para a oferta da formação inicial e continuada. Nos últimos 6 anos, vem trabalhando com a execução da formação técnica de nível médio, que requer aí uma série de regras e requisitos para atender a oferta para reconhecimento junto ao órgão responsável pela educação profissional no Brasil, que é o Ministério da Educação. E nesse formato, o Senar também se organizou para ofertar um curso que atendesse em âmbito nacional a demanda do setor e do sistema que representa, né? Onde você tem aí no produtor e trabalhador rural o seu público-alvo. E nesse sentido, um curso, né, com o perfil que atendesse essa oferta à distância, o curso inicial que nós começamos foi o curso técnico em agronegócio. Ele começou em 2015, com uma oferta, então, é um curso técnico com duração de 2 anos, tem aí uma carga horária, né, de 1.230 horas, para que a gente consiga, ao final, assumir um perfil de egresso que atenda às exigências tanto do MEC quanto do setor que nós representamos. E essa carga horária comporta, então, também a capacidade de realização do curso, que é 80% à distância e 20% presencial, né? A semipresencialidade aqui é presente no sentido de que a gente consegue conectar, né, que a gente consegue trabalhar de forma indissociável a teoria e a prática para a formação profissional. Para a entrada no curso também, nós requeremos que o aluno já tenha concluído o ensino médio. O Senar, então, oferta a formação técnica, né, e um dos requisitos é que o candidato já tem que ter concluído o ensino médio. Além do curso técnico em agronegócio, nós ofertamos também o curso técnico em fruticultura. O curso técnico em fruticultura já é mais recente. O ano passado, durante a pandemia, nós utilizamos esse período também para trabalhar a construção da oferta do curso técnico em fruticultura na modalidade à distância. É um curso onde você já tem uma ênfase maior no processo produtivo, então é um curso com 1.350 horas, na distância a gente vai desenvolver ele em 2 anos e meio, e justamente pelo caráter de trabalhar o processo produtivo, aqui 70% dele é à distância, mas 30% presencial, onde você vai trabalhar com o aluno a construção do conteúdo prático. E para a realização desse modelo de ensino, dar certo, à distância, para a realidade rural do Senar, nós trabalhamos com uma metodologia do modelo do ensino híbrido, né, com o uso de tecnologia associado às atividades presenciais. As mídias são construídas de forma integrativa, ou seja, as apostilas dialogam com o ambiente virtual, que dialogam com as videoaulas e que combinam com os encontros presenciais, onde o aluno ali, com acompanhamento no tutor, num polo de ensino, terá um momento em que ele vai trabalhar a prática daquela teoria que ele vem assimilando ao longo do processo educacional. Nós temos aqui um exemplo do material. Outro exemplo é um ambiente virtual de aprendizagem. Nós procuramos trabalhar com o ambiente virtual, onde nós temos aí uma acessibilidade, né? E o aluno não tem, justamente como o nosso diretor comentou, nós, considerando a dificuldade de conectividade no campo, a gente procura trazer um ambiente virtual com menos possível de recursos, de imagens, para que ele consiga baixar e consiga trabalhar realizando as atividades, né? Além disso, também, como nos cursos EAD, Senar, FIC, é um ambiente responsivo, ou seja, ele consegue acessar de qualquer meio, né? Seja por um smartphone, tablet, e para o desenvolvimento das aulas são utilizados os fóruns, onde o professor, o tutor à distância, tem ali momentos com os alunos, onde são propostas atividades, onde são propostas avaliações. O chat é um momento de encontro síncrono, né, do tutor com o aluno para tirar dúvidas. Normalmente, eles são muito utilizados próximo das avaliações, que aí o tutor tem como auxiliar os alunos nos esclarecimentos das principais dúvidas deles. Ou temos também a biblioteca, onde estão as apostilas em formato digital, além da impressa que a gente encaminha para eles, e onde estão também as videoaulas em formato streaming. E eles têm, como eu comentei, os tutores à distância, que estão trabalhando com eles, né? Além depois dos tutores presenciais. E no ambiente virtual você tem também os monitores, que auxiliam os alunos, principalmente nas dúvidas técnicas de acesso às ferramentas. Nós temos também o cuidado de ter uma integração entre os sistemas. Que sistemas são esses? O sistema acadêmico, onde estão ali os registros dele enquanto aluno, com o sistema de execução das aulas aqui, e também com o sistema que nós chamamos de PROC seletivo, que é um processo anterior, porque como vocês vão ver um pouco mais adiante, nós temos uma procura muito maior do que a quantidade de vagas que a gente oferece, então a gente faz uma seleção e os alunos entram e se matriculam. Então, aqui um exemplo das atividades que são realizadas no momento presencial nos polos de apoio presenciais do Senar, né? No polo de apoio presencial são realizadas as aulas práticas, são realizadas saídas de campo para que o aluno possa vivenciar, experienciar a execução do processo produtivo, né? E onde também são aplicadas as provas presenciais. Ao todo, nós temos, hoje, em 2021, já alcançamos, como o nosso diretor mencionou, 160 polos distribuídos nas 5 regiões brasileiras. Agora, um pouco, como eu comentei, dos números dos cursos técnicos à distância, de 2015 a 2021 do Senar, nós já tivemos, até hoje, mais de 109 mil inscritos, né, pessoas interessadas, candidatos em ingressar nos cursos técnicos que o Senar oferece, totalmente gratuito à distância, dessa formação técnica, e um total de 20.500 alunos matriculados, ingressantes, nos 2 cursos, no técnico em agronegócio e no recente fruticultura, com 25 regionais nossas participando, né? Elas são as responsáveis, como o nosso diretor comentou, e a Ana Ângela também, pela execução dos cursos nos polos. Então, são as regionais que indicam e que assumem o processo de aprendizagem presencial com a indicação dos polos, e total de 160 polos, como eu já mencionei, dos quais 152 são especificamente para o agronegócio e 34 para a fruticultura. Agora nós vamos comentar um pouquinho sobre a faculdade CNA, né? Porque dentro do sistema que nós representamos, como o André mencionou anteriormente, né, o Senar tem uma preocupação em organizar uma oferta mostrando uma trilha, um itinerário formativo para as pessoas que têm interesse em participar das atividades formativas do sistema, né? Então, o Senar oferece a formação inicial e continuada e a formação técnica, e a faculdade vem completar essa oferta agora com os cursos superiores de tecnologia, né, que são os cursos profissionais de graduação. Então, a faculdade CNA começa aí o seu credenciamento junto ao órgão regulador, que é o Ministério da Educação, em 2013, e inicia as atividades em 2014, com oferta primeiramente presencial, são um dos critérios da oferta do ensino superior no Brasil, e em 2015 inicia ali também as tratativas com o MEC para se credenciar para oferecer os cursos superiores de tecnologia à distância, que em 2018 consegue essa autorização e inicia a oferta dos cursos de graduação, né? Nós conseguimos isso também, a faculdade conseguiu, porque nós conseguimos aí uma boa avaliação na ENAD, isso são um dos critérios estabelecidos, e em 2019, 2020, a gente tem aí um rol de cursos sendo oferecido para alcançar muito mais o nosso público-alvo, porque a gente observa que com essa forma de oferta, né, a gente consegue atingir muito mais o produtor e o trabalhador rural, porque a educação à distância, ela traz uma perspectiva muito maior de flexibilidade para aquele produtor, para aquele trabalhador conseguir se organizar e participar das aulas, né? E aí, Ana Ângela pode passar para a próxima tela, por gentileza. Nós temos, então, esses são hoje o total de cursos superiores de tecnologia ofertados pela Faculdade CNA, né? São 50 polos atualmente, onde são oferecidos o curso Gestão do Agronegócio, né? Com um total de 2.500 horas, né? Ele é executado em 3 anos. O curso de Gestão Ambiental, com 1.700 horas, executado em 2 anos. O curso de Gestão de Recursos Humanos, com 1.700 horas, 2 anos também. E o curso Superior de Tecnologia em Processos Gerenciais, de 1.700 horas, executados em 2 anos também. Os cursos superiores de tecnologia tiveram um reconhecimento com um selo de referência que foi oferecido à faculdade pelo trabalho e pela capacitação dos profissionais, né, muito voltado para o setor que nós representamos. Obrigada, eu tentei manter o horário também, Eva, e estamos aqui à disposição para as perguntas que surgirem. Obrigada.
Wonderful. Thanks you very much, Anna, Angela, and Maria Cristina. It was a very rich presentation and shows how much work and innovation you've put into the offering, COALAR's offering. So congratulations on your achievements. And indeed, we will have another Q&A session after the presentations of our 2 TAFE Queensland speakers. We have made some time just to give you the opportunity to exchange and to participate a little bit more. So also acknowledging that we have a great participation today. We have 75 participants online as we speak, which is great to see. So I would like now to give the floor to two of the TAFE Queensland speakers, so 2 experts who are involved in online learning at one of the biggest TAFEs in Australia. So Shauna Vaughan, who's the Director of Operations at TAFE's Queensland Australia Pacific Training Coalition. So it's a branch of TAFE Queensland that works through the Pacific and funded by the Australian government, will first give us a broader picture of the transition of her institution to online learning and the type of considerations that had to be taken into account. She is on the Rosalie's, using Rosalie's computer, so you see her under Rosalie's name, and Rosalie will swap seats with her to make her presentation after that, more on the design of online courses and the perspective on online learning, similar to what Anna Angela and Maria Cristina have just presented. So Shauna, over to you for your overview of the transition to online learning at TAFE Queensland. Many thanks. And I think, yes, there is a presentation. Wonderful, all clear.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Shauna Vaughan. Thank you very much for the lovely introduction. I am currently Director of Operations in Papua New Guinea, at the moment still located in Brisbane because we're not able to travel to Papua New Guinea at the moment. But I have been in that role since February this year. Before that, I've been with TAFE Queensland for a very long time, and the last 10 years with TAFE Queensland Skills Tech.
I think Greg's had also the experience of slides taking a while. Otherwise, I'm also have your presentation as a backup.
Try pressing just the mouse click. That sometimes does it for me.
Yes, that's what I'm actually doing, is the mouse clicker, because that's always the safest on average.
Yeah, still not doing
I've been doing it. Eva, I might get you to actually, would you be able to run this presentation for me?
Yes, yes, I'm putting it up.
I'll stop sharing my screen.
All right.
I know this is not desirable. I do apologize, everybody.
I think hopefully we all have had experiences with technology and have adapted to it. You know, the topic of our conversation today. Just asking people to mute themselves when they're not speaking while I put the presentation on. Just bear with me a moment while
Perhaps, Rosalie, you could sing for us while we're waiting. Just give us a bit of background.
Exactly. I think that's right.
I'm actually Rosalie chair. It's a good thing I don't sing.
But knowing you Brazilians, I think we could create a choir if we could get ourselves organised. But maybe next time.
I am almost there. Just one.
Christina, we'd be expecting you to lead the choir. There we go. We're almost there.
So I think the next slide, Shauna, was about TAFE Queensland and the spread. And so if you could talk to that while my computer is trying to catch up.
While you're just organising that, no problems at all. Okay, so TAFE Queensland, TAFE being technical and further education, TAFE Queensland is a large public provider of vocational education in Queensland. We have over 125,000 students per year and more than 50 campuses. TAFE Queensland is actually divided into 6 what we call regions. So they're divided up in different areas throughout Queensland. I've worked in Skills Tech, and Skills Tech is what we refer to as the trade. So we actually do the vocational trades. Okay, the next slide. So we are actually based in the southeast of Queensland, so where the TAFE logo is there, and we currently have 4 campuses on there, again, as I said, specialising in trade areas. I have actually sent to Eva about a 3-minute video, which is very desirable, gives you a good overview of what we actually do, all our trades. But on the next slide, I've just taken a snapshot of some pieces. So if you can go to the next slide, Eva. Okay, I'll just continue going through. So the next slide just actually has a couple of screenshots. Our main areas at TAFE Queensland are automotive, heavy and light, as in trucks and cars, building and construction, so everything from wet trades, carpentry, plumbing, etc. We have manufacturing and engineering, so fabrication, welding, etc. And everything associated with electrotechnology, including instrumentation, which is now is utilised in the agriculture area. What I would like to do is actually speak really about our institute, TAFE Queensland Skills Tech, and our transition to online, where we've come from. So pre-COVID, what we looked like, our online experiences during COVID, and then 1 year on. So our lessons learned and how we've transitioned to online and virtual learning. This webinar, I'm actually going to talk about the student overview, or who the student is, who the teacher is, and what our teachers look like. Also, just at the end, there is just a page on research. So it's where I've actually researched. So just some links to where you might like to have a look for. Okay, I think Matthew's starting to share the screen as well. Okay, we're down to number 5, or you could go through that, Matthew, thank you. Okay, and this one, thank you very much. Back one, Matthew, thank you. The next one down, which is the looking for the staff student profile. Just up a couple. I think it's number 5, Matthew.
Perhaps.
Back.
Back one.
Back another one.
That's it. There.
That's this one. Okay, and one more, Matthew. Thank you so much. You're amazing. Thank you.
And apologies, my computer crashed.
Okay, looking, we'll just go, there's actually a picture, this particular. That's okay, no problems at all. So I want to talk about TAFE Queensland Skills Tech students. So our students come from post-secondary school in Australia. Our main cohorts of students are what we call apprenticeships, and they're in the trade areas. An apprenticeship in Australia is traditionally a 4-year employment scenario, and they come to TAFE, or Technical and Further Education, for about 6 to 8 weeks each year. So they do on-the-job training, and then they come and do technical learning there. Our other student cohort are actually our post-apprenticeship training, which is normally at the certificate for diploma level. So they are tradespeople, then they are extending their knowledge and skills into be masters of their destiny. So I use their Broadwell stages of competency, which I think explains students quite well. Our apprentice students are normally on level 2, whereas our post-trade students, certificate 4, are normally at the level 4 there, with their unconscious competency levels. Thank you. Our TAFE teachers. What do our TAFE teachers look like? Our trade TAFE teachers, they are normally on average between 25 and 60 that they've been in. They're in industry for a minimum of years. They have completed a certificate in training and assessment and or a vocational degree. So our TAFE teachers are what I would refer to as dual qualified, so they have a trade qualification and a teaching qualification. Also, with our TAFE teachers, we make sure that they do at least 2 weeks industry release each year to go back into industry to make sure they are up to date in all their skills that they are teaching the students. They also deliver and assess tools.
We seem to have some connectivity issues.
They develop and deliver tools from our assessments, our delivery, everything is actually spot on and compliant, as well as you know, they share their best knowledge. So it's not reinventing the wheel. The next slide, I'm going to talk about the delivery strategies before COVID-19. We actually do, the bulk of our students would be, as everything was classroom based, practical, but they're in a simulated environment. So when you do see our video, you'll notice that our workshops very much look like industry. So they do practical workshops areas and theory classrooms. The training was very much a teacher guided and with peer support. We do have a learning management system. We call it Connect, and things are kept online. Their assessments and things are all online, but has been historically teacher directed. So they sit in the classroom and the teacher walks around and guides them through and explains what is on the on Connect, on the learning management system. Then we went on to the next slide, which was the challenges during COVID. For the teachers, we at TAFE Queensland Skills Tech had a 2-week pause, and then we were back on point. During that time, the teachers had to learn virtual classrooms. Zoom, Adobe Spark were our major ones that the teachers learned. They also had to create resources that were suitable for online. As I said before, we did have a lot of things online, but the teacher talking and demonstrating had to then go into there. Teachers also had to learn how to share screens, like we've not done very well at today here, but virtual whiteboards, all of those tools that are for online learning. The other thing that we did that I think was very important at TAFE Queensland Skills Tech is, to begin with, we contacted all of our students in a group, but also individually on at least once a week, and then depending on the students, we extended that out. So teachers actually rang and checked on the students to making sure they were having no IT issues, they were getting used to the platforms, but also checking on their mental health, and then we had backups on that. We had counsellors and other people to support if anybody was having any issues. So the teacher learning strategies that we actually did, that the teachers did, we had lots of peer learning because it was such a short turnaround. Somebody would learn something, they would very much share that with others. We did also micro-credentials. So micro-credentials on how to use Zoom, how to do online delivery, all of those types of things. And the teachers used that and utilised that a lot, that professional development. I'd also like to acknowledge the fact that our IT for TAFE Queensland were amazing. They supported every time a teacher needed something. They helped, they gave us lots of tools to work from. And we also had our professional development areas work with the teachers, the ones that were having troubles, make sure they were up to snuff. Just you did a course, sometimes somebody came and sat with a teacher. that wasn't very IT savvy. And that worked really well. So the next slide. So 1 year on, what have we learnt? And I think what we're also going to keep with us. So our challenges was to involve the students and to motivate them and to keep them participating. We found that teacher there, instead of sometimes what would normally happen was the teacher would be out the front of the classroom going through a workbook. Well, here you can see we've got Adam with the workbook, but he's just online doing that. We also integrated a lot more of flip learning and training videos, and of course using Connect, our LMS system. We use lots of tools to create, because we are a practical organisation, we use commercial tools. There are some amazing commercial tools available, such as the one below, for just demonstrating things. The other thing that we did was the teachers went out with their mobile phones and demonstrated and took little videos, and those videos could be included in PowerPoints, on Zoom sessions, everywhere. And that worked very successfully. It was, what I found interesting was the students loved seeing their teachers. The videos did not have to be of professional standard at all, which was a surprise to us to begin with. They liked to see what they saw in the classroom, a teacher talking about something. It wasn't always perfect, but it was real. And they enjoyed that, and they seemed to learn that, enjoy that and learn from that very well. And that is actually something that we have very much kept on with. Our teachers are doing a lot more of those, and it's working very well. So I think what COVID has taught us for the transition to online learning, just a little bit quicker than we thought, was the fact that students are, as long as we engage with the student as an individual, we talk to them as individuals, we develop tools, either commercial, very basic tools, but keeping it real was very much what supported our students during the time. And also I'd like to indicate that we are continuing, our teachers seem to have gone a very long way in a very short time, and they've got opening up to lots of new ideas about doing augmented training and lots of more of those sorts of things, which is great. So I think this period has extended what we will be doing. But basically, I'd like to say in summary that TAFE Queensland Skills Tech has transitioned to online learning. It was a challenge, particularly upskilling the teachers, but making it real and delivering the quality education has been maintained during this process. I think they've done an amazing job. Thank you very much. And as I said before, on the last slide, there is actually some references you might like to look at. I will just actually take my headset off and I'll hand over to Rosalie. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Fiona, and apologies that I dropped out, but we will circulate the slides as well so that you can have access to the references in the final slides. And we now would like to welcome Rosalie Curlnane, an educator at TAFE Queensland, and focusing on online education and trainer education. And Rosalie will talk to us today about the design of online courses, modalities of teaching and competency-based assessment. So some hands-on feedback on online training from a teacher's perspective. Rosalie, hopefully your connection and access to your PowerPoint will work.
I have my fingers crossed. We'll give it a red hot go. Look, thank you so much for giving me time to speak with you this morning. My name is Rosalie, and as Eva pointed out, I'm a master trainer. So I do teacher training both here in Australia for our TAFE teachers, as well as I deliver an international course called International Skills Training, which is a teacher training course for underdeveloped and third world countries. So I really have a very strong philosophy that I would like to share with you about my teaching and educational process. But before I do that, I'm going to try and share a screen, and I'm going to try and get a PowerPoint going. So bear with me and we'll give it a go and then go from there. It's always an adventure. I'm going to go to screen 2.
So in the meantime, just saying that we have backed up. So there is me and there's Matthew Johnson at the embassy who also have your presentation. And things are showing up. So
at the moment, Eva, I'm screen 2.
Yes, we can.
Are you seeing a screen with the slides down the side?
Yes, that's right. So if you just...
Okay, so what I'm going to do, I think what I will do is just stick with this particular, with the slides and just work from the screen. It's working. So I think that might be wiser than us trying to do the full PowerPoint presentation. How do you feel about that? Or do you want me to try and move on to screen 1 for the full PowerPoint?
I think online learning has taught us that you flexibility and you go with whatever works. So I'm happy to we can see to go with your idea. We see the slides and they're working. So please continue.
I do think that this is probably not as pretty or as professional looking, but I think we will get through it with perhaps less stress than Shona did. So I would like to start this presentation by talking to you about my personal philosophy in terms of education. And I think it drives everything else that we'll look at this morning. I believe very strongly that it is through education that individuals and communities and countries grow and develop and achieve their best and become the best they possibly can be. So with that in mind, that sort of is my underpinning approach to everything. What I'd like to do is just talk to you very briefly about the things that I'd like to cover, because it is an interesting topic where we're blending, looking at competency-based learning and then how that has transitioned into or is supported by online learning. So I'd like to start by looking at what is competency-based learning and just briefly overview the main principles and the main driving theories or concepts that we work to, and then have a look at some of the blended and online learning delivery strategies that we have used and are developed in the process of developing, and look at how competency-based training is supported by that, or the online learning supports competency-based training. It was really interesting. Pre-COVID, we were, as Shona said, we were looking at, we were doing some online learning, and there was I think it's fair enough to say there was a reasonable amount of resistance by our teachers. But as we've moved through, that resistance has diminished. I have a favourite management and educational theorist. His name is Peter Drucker. And he said that learning is a lifelong process of keeping abreast of change, and that the most pressing task is to teach people how to learn. And certainly that is the case for our students. A lot of our students are, or most of our students are apprentices here at Skills Tech. And they have come through a traditional schooling system and they have left it somewhat disenchanted because it hasn't recognised or embraced or help them learn the way that they learn best. So what I love about competency-based learning is that it is student-focused. It's very student-centric. It's all about the learner. And it's all about finding different ways of helping the learner learn the way that they learn best. So we have lots of rules. But simplistically, competency-based learning has two major elements, and that is skills. So always we teach skills, and then we teach knowledge. Most of our learners are kinesthetic learners, so they like doing things, they like a hand-on approach. Not so fond of the theory, but then that is part of our challenge to help them understand that literacy and reading and theory supports what they're doing and helps them become the best they can be. We work mostly from units of competency. So a unit of competency is a set document that ASQA, which is the Australian Schools Quality Association, have developed. And they tell us what we are to teach, what the content is to be in that teaching, and the standards we are to achieve. So it follows how we develop our teaching and learning strategies and our assessment tools follows very much a constructive alignment process where we start with that unit of competency, we unpack it, we separate the skills and the knowledge, and from there we develop assessment tools. Now, an assessment tool is a theory assessment as well as a practical assessment. But then there are other things that we underpin. So we have benchmarks and mapping guides, and we'll look at them a little bit more as we move further. But once we have those assessment tools, then we can identify what we have to teach. So we start with the unit of competency, we move to the assessment. What are we going to assess them on? What is the best way of assessing that meets that unit of competency and our learner? And then how are we going to teach that information? So a simple approach, but we have some rules. I love a rule. Rules are great. So we have the principles of assessment and the rules of evidence that guide us, and they really give us a focus. Whenever there is something that we're not sure about, we refer back to the principles of assessment and rules of evidence. So the principles of assessment ask us, is the assessment that you've created, is it valid? Is it reliable? Is it flexible? Is it fair? So valid means, does it relate to current industry practices? Does it relate to the unit of competency? Reliable says, we have lots of teachers. If different teachers mark that assessment, are we going to come up with the same outcome? So our students have the same learning opportunity and the same opportunity to pass. Is that assessment flexible? And in being flexible, we're saying, can we contextualize that learning to our students' situation? So like Brazil, Queensland is very big, and some concepts don't apply as easily in one part of Queensland as another. So we contextualize, we adapt the content to suit the area. It also means, can we deliver that assessment in a variety of ways? So face-to-face, in a virtual environment, can we deliver it in hard copy or electronic? Can we provide reasonable adjustment? So can we make that learning appropriate to a student? Very student-centric. And then lastly, is it fair? And fair is my favourite, because I'm sure as teachers, all of you have had experiences where students go, "Aw, be fair." And my answer is, yep, I'll help you, I'll be fair. I will do exactly the same for you as I have for everyone else. But technically, fair means that we giving everyone an equal opportunity to pass, because competency-based training and assessment is about giving people an opportunity to be successful. The rules of evidence are about the assessment product that comes to us. So the questions are, is it current? Is it sufficient? Is the evidence valid? And is the evidence authentic? Current refers to its recency. So is the evidence that the student provided us, and it particularly works for recognition of prior learning. In one of the earlier presentations, you were talking about people who had many years of experience in their industry. So we offer recognition of prior learning for just that person. So instead of them doing a whole course, they provide us with evidence to show us that they can meet the requirements of the unit of competency, but through their skills and knowledge gained over the years. So current in that situation means, is the evidence they're giving us recent? In a classroom situation, current might mean, are we using the most current equipment? Are we using the most current techniques? Sufficient asks us if the evidence that the student gives us is sufficient. Is there enough evidence and enough varied evidence to show us that the student is competent, that they can do the task under a range of circumstances? Is the evidence valid? So does the evidence match what the unit of competency asks us to provide? And is it their own work? So one of the big arguments about authenticity initially for us was, well, if we're delivering online, how can we make that work? And increasingly, we're finding that that is not only the case, but it's actually easier for us to do it that way. If we look at some of the blended and virtual delivery strategies that we use, different areas in TAFE use different strategies. So these are some, and they're the ones that perhaps I'm more familiar with than others. So it's a very narrow scope. As Shona said, we deliver in a virtual environment. So we create what we call a blended delivery. So a blended delivery is when we send students information prior to the class. It could be information to read, it might be videos to watch, it might be, in the case of Adams, it might be plans that they are to have a look at and to analyse. And then in the virtual classroom, and in this case, this is a Zoom meeting, then they will discuss those things, they will talk through different aspects. So the student comes in with a level of understanding initially, and then the teacher builds on it and amplifies it. What's really good about a virtual delivery is that in a Zoom environment, we can use a whiteboard. So we've got students participating, and as Shona said, one of the key features for us is that student engagement and involving them and taking them on a learning journey, rather than them sitting passively and looking at a screen and checking their own devices and reading some emails and things like that. So we use a lot of devices to try and get our students involved. We use chat boxes a lot, we use polls a lot. We will have videos that we can embed into our lessons. So we use breakout rooms in Zoom as well, where we can break the groups into small classes or small sections. We give them a topic to discussion so that they can peer learn, which, as we know, is a really valuable tool. So what we have found in a Zoom situation is that we can record it. So now we have a flexible environment because we can use lots of tools. We have an authentic lesson delivery because they've been given information prior to the lesson. They have a teacher there that they can communicate with. They have breakout rooms where they can go and talk with each other and sort things out together. And it's valid because it's immediate and it's real.
Rosalie,
More and more, and one of the more exciting, yeah.
Just mindful of time.
Sorry,
so we have run a little bit late because of the technical issues. I would like to see if it would be okay to just stay an extra 5 minutes because Rosalie's presentation is very, very interesting. So if you could maybe, Rosalie, still summarize, but keep on going for 2 or 3 minutes, and then we could maybe stay on if people are available. So apologies for that, and sorry for interrupting, Rosalie. And if just buy a little bit of time for the discussion. Thanks.
No. And also if the participants have access to the PowerPoint, then the notes pages underneath actually develop everything that I'm talking about. So I can summarize each slide quite quickly for you, and then we can move on. How does that sound?
That's great. Many thanks.
No worries. Augmented reality is something that we are moving into, and it is a wonderful opportunity for our learners. And I do want to harp on this a bit because it's one of the things that I'm most excited about. What we are finding is that we are getting students create better outcomes faster and more safely. We are finding that because they're wearing the glasses, that they are in the present, they are there 100%. They can't play with their devices. And what we are finding too, that this sense of gamification, because we can print out their results, they're checking with their peers and going, well, how well did you go? And so that they are improving their standards through that sense of competition or gamification. We do have simulated classrooms. So this one's for medicine, where we can change things around. And one of the things that we are looking at is 3D, what's it called, imaging. So this way our students can see inside a product, like in this case, a wall where there's plumbing, or they can take things apart and put them together again. So a lot of wonderful things that our students can do to keep them involved. I mentioned previously, and I'll talk about this very quickly, about being sufficient. We map all our assessments, so we get to see that everything is covered completely, and that there is that flexibility, that there is lots of ways in which we develop learning and assessment tools. We have benchmarks. So the student will have an assessment question. The teachers have benchmark answers that they work to. So we have a sense of authenticity, or we are consistent in what we do. We also, in RPL, we communicate directly with our students through Zoom, which we haven't been able to do previously. And so we can ask our students, either in an RPL or in a learning situation, to demonstrate to us what they're doing at the time. And so we have this sense of reality and things happening as it's going, rather than later down the track. In our online learning management system, we have individual portals for our units. They are managed by the teachers, but we can watch what our students are doing. So we can communicate to them in a variety of ways, but we can also see how engaged our students are. So this student's doing really well, but if I've got some who are not really engaged, so I will contact them, I will communicate with them. And I have found that every time I have a contact with a student, they will start going back online for their learning. So I think one of the fears was that through virtual and online learning, that teachers would be redundant. In fact, they're more important than ever, that they actually are more, it's more one-on-one than previously. And our students are responding to that sort of thing as well. In our learning management system, we upload our learning information, all the resources, as well as the assessment. So the students can do everything in one spot and it's all retained there. We are able to communicate with our students. So we can communicate with them and give them feedback from their assessment. So it means that we guide them through that assessment and give them a good opportunity to be successful and pass. We can tell them their outcomes. We can upload individual things for that student so that when they have particular needs that we can address them. And so in that way, we are still being very student-centric.
So Rosalie,
we walk a fine line.
Yes, I think we need to leave it here, just mindful of time.
Awesome.
So if we can, we will circulate your slides, and thanks very much. Apologies for interrupting. And we'll just pass it to Matt and Christina and their team to make a few comments on the questions that came through the chat during the webinar, and picking up if there were any comments or questions there. So over to you.
Sliding Shona in so that questions can come through each of us, or four of the two.
Wonderful, many thanks.
Thank you, Eva. We did have one question earlier, but I think we managed to answer that through a chat from Fernanda, just about whether people outside of Australia or non-citizens are able to study at TAFE. So Christina has provided her an answer on that question. I can see here we have a raised hand from Auxiliadora Sana in Roraima. Do you have a question? Perhaps not. I can't see any more questions in the chat, unless Christina, you have some?
Não, até o momento não vieram perguntas, e apenas reforçando, se alguém não acompanhou, a gente está gravando, né, toda a discussão com a tradução. Nós vamos providenciar o link, mas para isso, se vocês puderem compartilhar o nome, o e-mail, e para nossa informação, saber um pouquinho de onde vocês vieram, a gente vai ficar bastante feliz em receber a manifestação de todos aqui presentes. E aproveite, se tiverem alguma pergunta ou fazer alguma comparação com casos do Brasil, fiquem à vontade.
And before we finish, we need to have a photo as well. So if everyone can open their cameras so we prepare for that as well, that would be great. But any questions, please feel free.
So also a reminder that this is the first of 2 webinars, and we will have a follow-up session next week, which will focus on the fruticulture, horticulture in Australia sector, and on Train the Trainer. So how to build capacity for trainers for online delivery. So these 2 topics will be covered as well next week. So we look forward to having you or your colleagues and your colleagues come and join us. And again, apologies for taking longer than scheduled, but we will have a group photo first, and then I'll pass the floor to for 2 minutes to Craig and Andre to close off today's webinar. So wonderful to see so many people, and such, a great coverage of the Brazilian, territory, which is wonderful, making training and skills accessible for all, which is what we also believe in Australia is important. So thank you very much. We'll take a few more pictures and pass that on as well to Senar. Great. One last one, and please, Craig, if you could.
O André, isso. Obrigada.
Thank you, Everett. Thank you, Matthew. It's been fantastic to be part of this dialogue. I must confess, though, what is even more fantastic is looking at my small computer screen and seeing all those faces from Brazil. The only thing I can hope for is that we get over this COVID and that we can travel and meet face to face. Whilst this is a fantastic means of engagement, meeting face to face has that slightly better element, and I'm sure that's going to occur at some particular point in time soon. So thank you everybody for your time, and we look forward to engaging next week on our second topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Craig. And Maria Cristina, apologies for interrupting there. So please, Maria Cristina, I think you were mentioning if you could speak on behalf of COALAR and make the final comments, if André is not with us anymore.
Isso, o André tinha um outro compromisso e me pediu para, em nome do COALAR, agradecer essa oportunidade de estar nesse momento conhecendo e compartilhando, né, das experiências de realização da educação profissional diante desse grande desafio que acaba sendo uma oportunidade de trabalhar à distância, né? Com as experiências trazidas pela Austrália, a gente observa o grande desafio de formação dos instrutores, né, da condução desse processo, como o Greg comentou, foi estressante realmente, porque você trazer um contexto inovador para uma realidade de execução em tempo real, né? Você não tem um momento para parar, para pensar, para trazer, não, está acontecendo e ao mesmo tempo você já tem que trazer uma realidade de execução da educação profissional. E aí ao mesmo tempo reconfortante observar uma outra realidade que também passou por esse desafio, né, transformando isso numa oportunidade. E educação é sobre tudo isso, você transformar momentos em processos contínuos de aprendizagem para todos os envolvidos, não é só o aluno em si, né? Nós estamos aqui, como o Greg mencionou anteriormente, aprendendo muito e dentro de um ambiente virtual, né? Quero agradecer mais uma vez, em nome do COALAR, esse convite da Embaixada e da TAFE Directors para estarmos aqui junto, e a todos os participantes do COALAR que se empenharam em estar conosco nesse momento para trocar essa troca de experiências, de ideia, e convidá-los também, como a Eva comentou, para um segundo momento, que nós teríamos na próxima terça-feira, aí já um pouco mais focado na cadeia produtiva da fruticultura. Muito obrigada e boa noite. Bom dia para quem está na Austrália e boa noite para quem está no Brasil. Muito obrigada.
Thank you so much. See you next week. Thanks for bearing with us and our technical problems, but despite that, you know, technology has so much to offer, and I think that's what we're learning and exchanging on. So wonderful to have you all here. Enjoy your evening. Thank you. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Obrigado a todos. Ciao.